Hello and welcome back everybody to the Foodbuild factory, where today we're going to take a look at the Outcast. That's the guy you can see on screen right now, and as always I'm going to show you some gameplay in the first half of the video, and in the second half of the video we're going to take a look at the perks, mutations, equipment and everything else. So let's get right into it. What I wanted to take a look at with this build here is pretty straightforward, and that is that I wanted to make use out of the laser pistol as a guerrilla build for once. And on this occasion, I went with a quad version that has better VATS crits, and I went with a bit of an unconventional idea here, which was to go with a power armor build. After all, my idea here was that I wanted to make a Outcast build, basically. For those of you who don't know, in Fallout 3 there were the Brotherhood Outcasts. Those were basically a splinter faction of the already splinter faction of the Brotherhood of Steel. And yeah, they just had different values basically to the main Brotherhood of Steel in the game, and therefore they called themselves the Outcasts. And they had a really cool appearance. Basically, they went all in with the typical stuff you would expect from the Brotherhood, talking power armor and laser weaponry and so on. But they had this really cool black and red skin and everything on their power armor stuff. And yeah, nowadays we do have that kind of skin in Fallout 76. I think I got it as a reward from the daily ops, and I really wanted to make a build out of it just because it looks so cool. Now, when it comes to equipment, we are using XO1 here, which is typically more like Enclave power armor. But it's one thing I never really talked about during my videos, but when it comes to role-playing in this game, in terms of equipment, I think it's just way easier to basically use whatever you like just because of the lore of Fallout 76, how it is. Um, During the storyline, you basically have to align with every single faction in the game, more or less. You have to meet them, and in terms of equipment, there's just, yeah, for example, there's a lot of cool weapons that you can only get from daily ops, which typically would mean that you are kind of Brotherhood aligned, just because, yeah, those quests come from the Brotherhood. So, yeah, you just have to accept the little differences here. For example, another thing is typically when you use Enclave, or when you make an Enclave character, uh, just from what we know from the Fallout series, you typically assume that they use plasma weaponry. That's just, yeah, plasma weaponry has always been kind of aligned to the Enclave in most situations. But in this game, there's no real mention of it, and yeah, you basically just use the best gear available to you. And I found that XO1 was a pretty cool thing here. In terms of lore friendliness, an Outcast in and of itself obviously isn't lore friendly to the game. Basically, the whole skin kind of doesn't make sense, just because, yeah, as I said earlier, the Brotherhood Outcasts were a very specific splinter group of that one chapter in the Capital Wasteland. But on the other hand, I think that basically every single Brotherhood member that doesn't feel like he belongs to that chapter anymore could very easily come to the conclusion to call himself an outcast. So yeah, there's that. And on this occasion, you could just justify that because you are using uh, the superior XO1 version. Maybe other Brotherhood members didn't really think you were aligned with them anymore or something, and so you are a Brotherhood outcast at this point. Way more talk than usually about my whole role-playing stuff and everything. I just felt that, yeah, I wanted to mention it shortly at least. And now to the more interesting stuff about the build. The first big thing, I just want to get a little bit away from the Fisher side, by the way, just so I don't really, yeah, fall into it and die. Um, the big elephant in the room here is a power armor vats character. That's just something you rarely see. I have taken a look at it quite a few times at this point, and the typical reason why you don't really want to do that is for fusion core consumption. Basically, once you're using vats in power armor, you really burn through your fusion cores very fast. And for a lot of people, that's just outright a bummer, and means they never use vats within power armor. I always think that, yeah, for a high-level player, it's not the end of the world to keep a stack of fusion cores, and with a little bit of investment in terms of perks and everything, you can definitely get away with it without making it too crazy. More specific on this occasion, what we are using is we are using a repair bobblehead, which reduces our amount of fusion core drainage, and we do use the power user perk, so overall our fusion cores have twice as much charge to begin with. And that's basically it. Doing that, I felt like I could get away quite easily with the build. Sure, you're running through a few fusion cores here and there, but it wasn't too crazy after all. Another big thing is in a lot of situations, talking about fighting super mutants or fighting robots, uh, you do have the electric absorption perk, which means during those fights you can oftentimes get away without depleting a single fusion core, just because while you are fighting, you also do regenerate fusion core drainage from being shot by energy attacks, which you can see right here. We are full back to a full fusion core. So those fights are basically free as far as fusion cores come. And seeing how oftentimes you will fight super mutants and they are very beneficial to farm legendaries and farm experience, yeah, it's not that this is a very rare occasion. Also, Blood Eagles, for example, they tend to carry a lot of energy weaponry. And since we are an outcast on this occasion, we have perfect justification to just um, decimate these guys here. Another big thing, now that we have talked about why I found using vats within power armor not a big issue here, is how the laser weapons in and of themselves aren't really too great in this game. They suffer from a lot of downsides compared to other weapons, and a lot of people don't like them outright. Now, one thing you can say for certain is these are one of the weapons where, outside of vats, I would just not bother with them. Now, there are a few ways I have tried in the past, and you can get away with it in terms of damage output. It's definitely possible to run such a build, but it's just very ammo inefficient. You will burn through a ton of fusion cores when you're trying to use laser weaponry, other than the Gatling laser, by the way. I'm specifically talking about modified versions of the laser gun, laser pistol, you name it. Yeah, you will run through a ton of fusion cells, which doesn't mean that using VATS means this is a very ammo efficient weapon to begin with, but it's definitely manageable. And another big thing is, since energy weapons have a different time penetrating armor due to the way their armor penetration is calculated differently to compared to ballistic stuff, overall, energy weapons tend to not be the best weapon in the game. Whenever I have shown off energy weapons in the past, laser weapons to be more precise, I typically went with anti-armor stuff, which I still think is one of the best effects, if not the best effect, when it comes to laser pistols and laser rifles. But on this occasion, we went with a quad version. As I said, quad version with better VATS crits. And recently, interestingly enough, Captain Noob made a video where he finished Colossal Problem, killing Earl with only laser weaponry, and I think he used a combination of anti-armor versions with better VATS crits, and also a quad version with better VATS crits. So it's not that the weapon is useless, it definitely has its place within the game. You can make use out of it. Um, to be honest, the single thing I think they should change in order to make this weapon more viable is to just increase the amount of fusion cells you get from crafting by a lot. After all, it's a bit on the more expensive side to craft just because you need copper and plastic. And while you can farm these things relatively efficiently, yeah, they just yield too little, in my opinion. But nowadays, with all of the legendary crafting perks and proximity looting, which works very well with this weapon when it comes to ghouls, by the way, then you do have daily ops to farm enemies. And after all, what I done here is I went with the prime version. So once all of that comes together, you can really get a lot of fusion cells relatively easily. The flux you need is Crimson, I think. which isn't the most common stuff in the world, but yeah, for a high-level player, you can definitely get away with using that. And the last little bit I really haven't touched so far is damage output, which, yeah, you need to invest a lot into vats crits in order to make energy laser weapons viable in terms of damage output. But once you do that, it actually is pretty great. Now, it's nothing compared to, as always, basically a stealth fixer, for example, meaning a fixer used in stealth, by the way, or some certain heavy weapons and so on. But still, you can see here the time to kill for pretty much everything that we encountered so far is relatively short. We do get a great benefit from quad just because the weapon in and of itself, if it turned automatic, doesn't have the biggest ammo capacity. I think we're talking 21 fusion cells per magazine or something like that, so you constantly have to reload your weapon. Now, you will see me reload a lot of times when it's not necessary just because I'm so used to doing tactical reloads, but yeah, as you see there, we have 111 shots, and in a lot of situations that is enough to clear entire camps and so on. So basically, the only thing we really make use out of when it comes to damage is better VATS crits. Other than that, we do have a 2-star version, so there's no third effect. When it comes to that, I personally would most likely go for less VATS cost on this situation. If you have an anti-armor version, for example, I would probably prefer something like faster reload. But yeah, that's basically my two ideas. Obviously, you do have the approach of going for 23 luck and combining critical savvy with the VATS crits filling faster legendary effect, and therefore get a crit on every second shot. But in my opinion, we do come pretty close to doing that either way. So we do get a crit on every third shot, and we do have a good chance that on the shots in between we can refill our critical meter with the Fall Leaf Clover perk, because what we are doing here is we are using the Beam Splitter modification on the weapon, which basically turns this into kind of a shotgun. It still benefits from the Guerrilla perks, so it doesn't change anything in terms of our designated perks that we use, but it does split up your damage. It does split up your projectiles and therefore does split up your damage. So usually you wouldn't really want to go for that, just because you lose out on quite a lot of armor penetration due to the fact that you are splitting up your projectiles. But on the other side, you do get a significantly better damage increase from the Tenderizer perk, which does stack if all of the projectiles hit at the same time, up to like 40% extra damage as far as I know. And yeah, that makes the gun pretty solid in my opinion, as long as you keep being in VATS and as long as you can basically maintain fire on an enemy, you can do a lot of damage. You can also, outside of that, do quite some damage, so that was surprising to me. I was tempted to go with a non-VATS build here, but I figured I want to do this build first, and then pretty soon probably you will see me use a very similar weapon to this and use it outside of VATS. Hope this is going to be great. I do have a good feeling. In the past, as I said earlier, I had pretty bad experiences when it comes to this kind of usage of laser weapons, but it's a possibility. So even if you run out of VATS, you will be able to do some significant damage, and that's not really something you really have to worry about, though, just because, yeah, we do have quite fast AP refresh. I will just demonstrate that. I mean, you have seen it during the video a lot of times at this point, and yeah, it's refilling very fast. And in addition to that, we do have stuff like Grim Reaper Sprint and everything. So you've seen it. We could basically use the VATS the whole video without ever having to worry about it. It only really becomes a little bit of an issue when we are fighting really tough stuff that that soaks up a lot of our shots. But even then, yeah, our AP refresh is good. So as you can see here, we're talking like 2 to 3 seconds, and we're basically back to being able to use VATS without a problem. And yeah, that was the gameplay part of the video. I hope you enjoyed it so far. And no, there's one more enemy left. And yeah, if you see down there, with the help of our repair bobblehead, we basically only went through around one single fusion core during this whole process here, which in my opinion is very manageable. I think you can all agree. And not mentioning that, yeah, on this occasion, we could just easily let this fusion core refill by just being hit by an enemy with energy attacks. And this guy, for some reason, doesn't let me vets him, but so we can show off our damage output. Thing is, you will, as I said, need more uh, ultraside fusion cells to kill enemies than without using vets. But yeah, other than that, definitely an option. And yeah, now I think we definitely finished, and herefore we can say goodbye. Take another look at our guy in daylight. As I said, I really like the aesthetics here combined with the red headlight, meaning red eyes on the XO1. Yeah, this is great. Works together very well. And now let's take a look at our mutations and everything. So starting off with them, one thing you can see here, we have 1 hour and 44 minutes left on our fusion, on our bobbleheads, which means 30% less fusion core duration, 30% more fusion core duration, which is great. We do get a little bit of a bonus from power armor, and lastly, we do have a targeting matrix on our helmet, meaning that we have a little better VATS accuracy, which is obviously very nice for our build here. In terms of modifications, we do have Bird Bones, Eagle Eyes, Electrically Charged, Marsupial, and Speed Demon. Have shown this off in the past quite often. Very bare bones combination when it comes to a VETS character. Extra agility, perception, and crit damage for our VETS usage from Bird Bones and Eagle Eyes. Then we do have Electrically Charged, which is kind of a non-necessary perk here. It's just, non-necessary mutation here. It's just a leftover from another build that basically has no downside to us, so therefore I didn't really bother to remove it. It just, every now and then, if an enemy gets close enough to do a melee attack on us, there is a chance that we have this little electric explosion going on around us and damaging the enemy. But yeah, other than that, not really an issue. So it's there. And lastly, we do have Marsupial and Speed Demon just to move around quicker. More jump height, faster movement speed, all very beneficial. And in addition to that, we also have a little bit of extra carry weight, which is always nice. And lastly, more reload speed. Not the most necessary stuff on this particular character, just because we do have a quad version and reloads typically happen outside of combat, so we do have time, but still, faster reload is faster reload. Going over to our equipment, here it is, the weapon of choice. We do have a quad automatic laser pistol with better VATS crits. As I said, sadly only a 2-star, but was really happy with the drop. And in terms of modifications, I went with the prime capacitor. I said it in the past. When it comes to laser weapons, I think priming them is a very beneficial thing to do. Firstly, the damage increase is pretty great. I think without prime receivers, my damage was somewhere around 65 or so. So pretty significant increase. And other than that, the more important stuff, by the way, in my opinion, is just the amount of fusion cells you can craft. With rank 4, I think, or rank 3 of Ammo Factory, I do craft like 450 ultraside fusion cells a go. With all the other perks, obviously, Ammo Smith and so on, but still very beneficial in my opinion. And yeah. Then we do have an aligned automatic barrel. This is a pretty obvious choice. We do use that, so aligned gives us most benefits when it comes to our AP usage. In terms of the grip, I went with standard because the only other option for pistols or guerrilla weapons is the true grip, which would give us a little bit more accuracy when it comes to VATS. But the difference isn't too great in my opinion, and I rather went with the little bit more condition that comes with the standard grip, just because yeah, condition is one of the downsides of this weapon. We basically burned through like 50% of it during the video, so you can imagine you have to repair your weapon every now and then. It's not too crazy, it's definitely manageable, but noteworthy nonetheless, in my opinion. Then we have a reflex sight, very similar to the aligned automatic barrel. Yeah, this just improves our VATS gameplay by reducing the amount of action points we use per shot, and in addition to that, it gives us a little bit more accuracy yet. And lastly, we do have the beam splitter. When it comes to the nozzles, basically, I think they're nozzles. You do have the beam focuser, the gyro lens, and the beam splitter. Now, the gyro lens and the beam focuser have a single shot with them, and I think they reduce your AP cost a little bit and everything. But surprisingly enough, the beam splitter does increase your accuracy, which was kind of a surprise, to be honest. But yeah, we take it. Anyways, I just mentioned earlier how we want the beam splitter for better use of tenderizer. And yeah, that's everything I can say about the weapon, basically. It is what it is. Then we do have a set of power armor here. I do have one Aristocrats version with less explosion damage, which is not so interesting. Another Aristocrats version, basically Aristocrats effect is kind of lost here. I think we do even get the effect from it. I should be around 30,000 caps. But yeah, we do have good resistances as it is. We're not really looking to increase them too much. Reduces damage while blocking obviously is useless to us because we can't even block. The interesting thing here is just overall we should have 3 pieces that have AP refresh. Here's a Ghoul Slayer piece. I mean, ghouls hardly are the biggest enemy or the biggest threat to us, but yeah. A Zealots piece, yet again, similar to the ghouls, nothing crazy. And here we have another one, Zealots, yet again, but another AP refresh thing. So I have to, sorry, I'm sorry, we do have 2 powered pieces, not 3. I was wrong on that. But still, we do get quite significant increase in AP refresh from those 2 pieces. And lastly, here's our helmet. As I said earlier, we do have the VATS Matrix overlay modification to increase our VATS accuracy just a little bit. And then we do have the headlamp red tactical because I like the red lights coming out of your eyes. Pretty straightforward stuff, I would say. And yeah, that means we're going over to our perks here. When it comes to strength, all of it is basically just weight reduction, traveling pharmacy. I mean, if you don't need it, that's fine. I just tend to carry a ton of useless stim packs that I never going to use up, but I can't really throw them away either. So yeah, traveling pharmacy is here. And similar to that, we do have Bandolier, which obviously wouldn't be necessary for this character if you went through with it fully, just because yeah, you're using energy ammo, so you could just not bother carrying around ballistic ammo. On this occasion, though, I don't really have the stash space to throw away or to stash all of my ballistic ammo, and yeah, that's why I went with Bandolier here. So keep that in mind. Theoretically, none of these are necessary to you, depending on how well you can manage your weight, which shouldn't be too much of a problem. You have pretty good carry weight on this character due to calibrated shocks on the legs, which I forgot to mention earlier. Then we go over to perception. This is obviously a bit more important, and I wanted to be it to be quite high just to get some more benefits in terms of our bet's accuracy. Even though perception hardly increases your perception by any significant means. I said it in another video. I think it's like 2% per perception point, but still, I want it to be quite high. Now, in terms of necessary perks here, Tankula is very beneficial to us, giving us a bit more of the armor penetration, which we so desperately lack, as I mentioned earlier. Stagger chance is also nice. I think it should improve with the amount of shots we do per shot, just due to the beam splitter, but it's decreased by being an automatic weapon. So overall, you do have a chance to stagger, but it's hardly something we really take. into consideration when we fight, just because yeah, enemies typically die too quickly either, anyways. It's really the armor penetration we are after here. Then we do have Concentrated Fire, a very beneficial perk here. Usually rank 1 would be enough, just because on automatic weapons the increase from shot to shot is not as high as it is on semi-automatic weapons, meaning that on most situations you get the best bang for your buck by just using rank 1 of Concentrated Fire, so you are able to target individual body parts, so you can target weak spots and still get a little bit of a increase in vats hit chance per shot. But since I wanted to have high perception and had to fill it with something anyways, Concentrated Fire is one of the more beneficial perks to use here, so I maxed it out. And that leaves us with Exterminator and Glow Sight. Those two are situational. Exterminator yet a bit more situational than Glow Sight, but still, once we do fight enemies that will be affected by these perks, we can be glad to have them. Especially Glow Sight is nice if you are in nuke zones or something like that. And Exterminator, I'm pretty sure, should work against Mirelurk Queens and Mirelurk Kings. Correct me if I'm wrong, by the way. I've said this in a few other videos already, so I'm happy to be corrected here. I never really tested it, but I'm pretty sure it should work like that, just because I assume it's the same. It uses the same keywords in order to figure out which enemies it affects as the Exterminator's legendary effect, which I'm like 99% sure does affect my lurks. So yeah, that's it for perception. Then we go over to endurance, which is definitely our dumpstead here. We are relatively tanky due to the fact that we are in power armor, and that's basically something I didn't really mention during the video. There would be a good argument to say, well, what does power armor really add here? It's just basically a hassle for fusion cores, and well, that's the thing. It means we can really treat endurance like a dumpstead, and still, we're not super tanky or anything, but for day-to-day combat, it's more than enough, and lets us get away with having such low endurance, in my opinion, and not a lot of defensive perks overall. And yeah, the only one I bothered with here is Fireproof, just so I don't really get one hit by some random exploding car or random exploding legendary robot or something like that. So I mention it often, Fireproof is a very beneficial perk, one of the best defensive perks in the game. Then we go over to Charisma, which is at 7 with a combination I very often go for, Lone Wanderer and Tenderizer. Now, when it comes to Tenderizer, I talked about it during the video a lot. Yeah, we can stack up to 40% extra damage, multiplicative damage that is, after our first hit on a target due to the fact that we have multiple projectiles on our weapon, and that makes it probably one of the best damage damage perks overall in this build. Another thing you will see soon, in general, I went with way more damage perks than usually, and you really see the difference in my opinion. When it comes to laser weapons in the past, I have focused extremely on VATS crits, and I've done the same here, but also due to the fact I'm using power armor and a lot of legendary perks, I was able to also focus on damage perks quite a lot. Then we have Lone Wanderer here, as I just mentioned it already. The interesting part for us here is more AP refresh. As I said during the video, I really wanted to have good action point refresh going on. Now, in your day-to-day combat, oftentimes the AP refresh doesn't really bother you too much either way, for the simple reason that, yeah, Grim Reaper Sprint does a very good job here to keep you in combat with VATS. But where this really becomes important is once you're fighting stuff like Scorch Beast and so on, which you can't really kill within a single round of shots in VATS. So you have to refresh your action points in between your damage dealing situations. So yeah, overall the combination of two power pieces and Lone Wanderer was enough so I can really get away with it. And one thing I didn't mention as well is our torso modification for the power armor is the core assembly modification, which also increases our AP refresh. So yeah, those are the three things we do use in order to keep up our action point refresh, and that means we can bother with not using Action Boy in agility, but we come to that in a second. Next step is intelligence, which I also wanted to be relatively high for the simple fact that, yeah, I wanted to use Power User, as I said in the beginning of the video, just to make the problem of running through fusion cores so fast a little bit less of a problem. And yeah, Power User just was a very obvious pick for me. It pretty much always is there when I use vats in Power Armor. Another perk I just had to take basically is batteries included, just because, yeah, you want to carry a good amount of fusion cores with you, which are quite heavy, and in addition to that, your main weapon uses fusion cells, ultraside fusion cells, which aren't the heaviest ammo in the game. They are actually pretty lightweight, but still, since you want to carry a ton of them, batteries included definitely is a must pick in my opinion here, and so is Gunsmith. Yeah, oftentimes Gunsmith is used just for convenience, and basically always it is, because it reduces the time. Sorry, it increases the time your weapon runs without breaking. But on this occasion here, yeah, without Gunsmith, I really wouldn't want to use this weapon. Just because, yeah, as I said, condition is a little bit of a problem on it, and yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're swimming in repair kits and so on, at a certain point, this becomes a non-issue to you. I still like to have Gunsmith on though, and after all, a bit more intelligence doesn't hurt either way. And that means we are now at agility, and as you can see here, we went with all the guerrilla perks maxed out. We do have adrenaline and only one rank of gun fu, and that's it. Now, usually when I use gunslingers or guerrilla builds, I have to make way more compromise here because I want to have stuff like White Knight or Action Boy here, and yeah, all these things, it becomes even worse if you want to do a stealth gunslinger, for example, or guerrilla. But on this occasion, we don't have to bother with all that stuff just because we are in power armor and do have access to the core assembly modification on our torso, which basically is pretty much as effective as Action Boy, if not better. And yeah, White Knight doesn't affect it anyways, and so on. So yeah, pretty much every single perk you see in agility gives us extra damage. Guerrilla, very straightforward, gives us extra damage. Adrenaline gives us extra damage in most situations. And Gunfu, while we're not using it too often, it does happen. And if it does happen, it also gives us extra damage. So yeah, pretty straightforward when it comes to agility, not a lot to talk about here. And that leaves us with luck. So as you can see here, we do have Grim Reaper Sprint, which, as I said, helps us whenever we are fighting ghouls, scourged, super mutants, and so on. Yeah, this perk really makes it so we can basically stay in beds all of the time without even falling back on using our AP refresh for the most part. Better Vats crits was a very obvious pick. I would never do a Vats critical build without using better Vats crits just because why not? You know, it's just extra damage on a lot of shots that you do. Then we do have critical savvy. Now this alone in combination with 15 luck makes it so we do refresh our so we do get a crit on every third successful hit, meaning, yeah, you do a critical, shoot an enemy, shoot another enemy, or the same one, and you're back to having a crit. But in addition to that, we do have Fall Leaf Clover, which has a good chance to refill your critical meter at rank 3 whenever you hit an enemy. And this basically I do a lot on shotgunners because this chance applies to every single projectile you do hit an enemy with. Meaning that on multiple projectile weapons like shotguns, the harpoon gun with the flashé modification, or here the um, laser laser pistol with the beam splitter modification, this really makes it so you have a very good chance to refill your critical meter. It's not as high of a chance as with shotguns, but you still get a very good chance. So while we get a crit on every third shot safely, we do have a good chance to refill our critical meter after our with the first shot after we done a crit. So yeah, It's useless in a lot of situations because it can trigger when we're doing a crit. It can trigger, I mean, it can trigger, but it won't make a difference on our third shot, just because, yeah, at that point we do refill our critical meter anyway. It's only there for the second shot, but still, I think it's worth it here. And lastly, we do have Starch Genes, as we pretty much always have, just so we can keep our mutations and not get any new ones. And the one point that was left, just because I wanted to have luck at 15, is Curator here. And on this occasion, it actually is very beneficial because I do want to run with repair bobbleheads as much as possible. Um, as you know, if you know my channel, I'm not a big fan of building characters around consumables. But on this occasion, this is something like you don't have to do it. It just basically, yeah, you do run through fusion cores a little faster if you don't have a repair bobblehead. But it's very nice if you do have one. And I found that, yeah, I always have a good amount of them. I currently just on this character found like 4 just from general exploring without farming them, without buying them over like Market 76 or so. And yeah, you should easily get a good supply of them if you actually want to do so for relatively cheap. And they really help a lot and are a very beneficial consumable just because they are active for 2 hours with this perk, which is great. And yeah, that's it for all of our standard perks, and then we go over to our legendary ones, and the boring ones right off the bat. Uh, Legendary intelligence, strength, agility, and luck. Those are pretty much always there just so I can have access to more perks to begin with. The only exception here is agility. I think we have 14 base agility, so we can pump up our agility to 16, our passive one. But yeah, that's basically it. Just gives us a little bit more action points for the most part. Then we have Electric Absorption. This is a very beneficial perk. I always use it when I'm in power armor. Said it time and time again. One of the better legendary perks in my opinion. I also mentioned it during the video. Yeah, if an enemy with an energy weapon attacks you and actually hits you, you do have a chance that it refills your fusion core, and it also heals you if that happens. Meaning that first and foremost, you are way more tankier in situations where you fight robots or super mutants or blood eagles or whatever. And in addition to that, it really helps to maintain your fusion cores, just because those kind of fights where these kind of enemies are present, you're most likely not going to run out of your fusion core. You will refresh. Sorry, your fusion core will be recharged faster than you can decharge it by using your weapon and vats. One thing you can do, it's just a little bit of training to be honest, is focus on killing the ballistic enemies first. In terms of, yeah, if you, let's say we are at West Tech here, yeah, you just look at the enemies, and if they have a ballistic weapon, you go for them. If they have an energy weapon, you just skip over them until the fight is until all the others are cleared out. But it's not really necessary, in my opinion. Just go however you like it. And lastly, we do have Ward Rats. Now, Ward Rats, in no way is it necessary once you are on the power armor character, just because you have very good radiation resistance and passive radiation reduction to begin with. But still, I do just like it. It's one of my favorite legendary perks, just because it's no way overpowered or anything. But yeah, it just makes it so I don't have to bother using a red away every now and then, and I'm basically always at full health, which is just a convenient thing to look at, in my opinion, a pleasant thing. So yeah, that's why it's there. But feel free to go with whatever you like here. Maybe there's a good chance that you have like none of the legendary stats maxed out and want to use 5 instead of 4 with lower ranks or something like that. So yeah, go for it and don't use what rats. All it does is it makes it so you don't have to use a red away every now and then. And yeah, that was it. I hope you enjoyed it. And well, one thing I didn't really mention so far is how, yeah, I've thought about making a special video when it comes to the Christmas season or anything. But after all, I do these kind of wacky characters every now and then. But for the most part, I do prefer the more lore-friendly, so to speak, characters more. I mean, lore-friendly is kind of a big stretch when we're talking about an Outcast character in Fallout 76, but You know what I mean. I want characters that fit into the wasteland, seem badass, and so on, for the most part. And I just didn't want to go with a Santa Claus, to be honest. Not that I'm not going to do it, and at some point, but yeah. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time. Bye.